Good afternoon, Minister. My name is Janani Shanmuganathan, and I am counsel for the Canadian Constitution Foundation. And today, in your evidence, you talked about the economic and financial consequences of the protests. You talked about the reputational damage to Canada as an investment destination. And at the end of Commission Counsel's examination, she asked you to explain how you understood this, economic harm was linked to national security. Do you recall that?
Yes, I do.
All right. And your answer to that was you believe our security as a country is built on economic security. And if our economic security is threatened, all of our security is threatened. And now I'm not asking you to elaborate on this. I just want you to confirm that this was your evidence.
Obviously, I don't have word by word recall of what I said, but that's what I believe, and sounds like you're reading the transcript, so.
All right, thank you very much. And now, I take it you know that in order to declare a public order emergency pursuant to the Emergencies Act, there must be what's called threats to the security of Canada. You're aware of that?
Yes, I am.
And the Emergency Act says that threats to the security of Canada has the meaning assigned by Section 2 of the CSIS Act. You're aware of that?
Yes, I am.
All right, so I just want to take you to Section 2 of the CSIS Act, and this is COM, either 5 zeros or 6 zeros 935. It should be 5 zeros. If I can take to page 8, please. Perfect. If you can just pause there. So the CSIS Act defines threats to the security of Canada. And we've heard evidence in this commission that for the purposes of invoking the Emergencies Act here, the focus was on C. That's where they were focused on in terms of the threats to the security of Canada. So what C says is activities within or relating to Canada directed toward or in support of the threat or use of acts of serious violence against persons or property for the purpose of achieving a political, religious, or ideological objective within Canada or a foreign state. So you see that?
I do.
All right. And so in terms of the economic harm that you've described today, the reputational damage to Canada as an investment country, you'll agree that it doesn't fall within C, right? The activities relating to Canada directed toward or in support of the threat or use of acts of serious violence. Would you agree with that, or is that fair to say?
Not precisely. If the direction of these questions is to ask me, did I believe we were acting within legal authorities granted by the Emergencies Act? If that's where this question is leading, then my answer is yes, I believed we had the authority to do what we did. And I hope no one is surprised by my saying that. Had I not believed it, I would not have done it, and I wouldn't be here speaking, with sadness, but confidence that we did the right thing.
So my question was whether the economic harm that you've described today falls within the definition found in C, which speaks specifically to the support of the threat or use of acts of serious violence against persons or property for the purpose of achieving a political, religious, or ideological objective within Canada or a foreign state. Does the economic harm you've described today fall within C?
It's a big question, and so I was offering an answer in several parts. And I offered the first part of it, and I can continue if you'd like.
No, I mean to be respectful. I just want to know, I appreciate that your position is that Canada acted within lawful authority to invoke the Emergencies Act, but I just want to understand if the economic harm that we spent a lot of today talking about, whether that falls within the scope of C. And so I just want to know your answer to that question.
And I also really do want to be respectful and answer this really important question. But it's a big question, so I'm going to have to take it in stages. And I offered the first stage. I can carry on if you'd like.
Sure.
So that was my first stage. Second stage is in terms of, one of the things that this commission is, I think, quite rightly investigating, was the government acting within its authorities? For me, as finance minister, an important factor in the judgment I came to, which is that we were, was the expert advice that we received. I'm not a lawyer. I rely on the judgment of officials who advised us and on expert legal advice. And I say that even as I am very confident that it was the right decision and confident in taking personal political responsibility. I can also speak to what I saw and experienced and believed that falls within the scope of the serious violence against persons or property point. But I do want to be clear that I'm not speaking here as someone with an expert legal opinion, but I'm speaking as a minister who made a political judgment and as someone who was also in Ottawa. So some of the things that factored into my thinking about it were, as I described in my testimony this morning, a real concern that we were in a tinderbox situation where the economic threats and the threats generally that and the damage that were being created both by the Ottawa occupation and the Ambassador Bridge did risk, I felt, at every moment, some kind of conflict between protesters and counter-protesters. I saw that and experienced it myself, just being a person who was in Ottawa. I felt it was a tinder keg that could be sparked at any moment and was therefore very dangerous. And although I didn't see it myself, I heard accounts of Windsor of a situation there, which I found to be very credible. I was also influenced, can I say one more thing?
Sure.
Which speaks to this. I was also influenced by our IRG meeting on, I think it was the Saturday, the 12th, where we heard from the RCMP commissioner about concerns that there were serious weapons in Coutts. And that really raised the stakes in terms of my degree of concern about what could be happening there, but also what could be happening in this sort of whack-a-mole copycat situation across the country.
Okay, so my question was about how you understood the economic harms to fall within subsection or C, the definition of threats to security of Canada in C, And as I understand your explanation is it falls within it because there's a risk that the economic harm that's being created by the protests could somehow manifest into actual threats of violence. Is that your understanding of how it falls within C?
I'm going to object to the question as phrased. That's a legal question.
I'm just trying to find out she's offered an explanation for how she says the economic harm falls within C, and she linked it directly to the threats or use of acts. And I'm just trying to understand what that link is.
I mean, my counsel may have something to say, but I don't think that's a fair characterization of what I said just now or of what I said this morning. What I think is fair is, first of all, that I relied on expert legal judgment to make a very important and weighty legal decision. What I also said is, as a person who was here in Ottawa, I did see a real danger of violence. And then finally, what I described in my testimony this morning was the way in which the economic security of our country, I really believe, is a part of our national security. But that was a much broader conversation we were having about a broad set of issues, which I certainly think are important for us to think about and consider.
And I don't want to mischaracterize your evidence. Just so that we're all clear, do you see a link between the economic harm that you say was caused by the protests to Canada with what's contained in C in terms of the threats or use of acts of serious violence against persons?
And again there, I really do not want to shirk my personal political responsibility. And while this was a grave and serious decision, we took it carefully and thoughtfully, and I believed it was the right decision then, and I believe today it is the right decision. But I'm also conscious, if I may continue.
Of course.
I'm also conscious that I am not a lawyer, and I'm not a person who can give expert opinion on the precise parsing of these authorities. It was important for me to be assured that we did have the authority to act, and I received, as a cabinet member, assurances that we had those authorities from people who I believe were qualified to offer those assurances.
And I don't mean to belabor the point. I just want to make sure the evidence is clear. So your evidence is that you understood that you had the authority to invoke the Emergencies Act, but in terms of saying there's a linkage between the economic harm caused by the protests with the requirement of the threat or use of acts of serious violence, is that something that you can't speak to?
Again, Commissioner, this is a legal interpretation question that will be addressed in closing submissions.
And I don't mean to belabor this. I just want to make sure I understand Deputy Minister's evidence. Is she just saying that she can't comment on it because it's a legal question, or she's saying that there is a link? I just want to know what the answer is.
I renew my objection and would ask for a ruling on it.
Okay, well, I think at the end of the day, I don't think you can pursue this any further at the moment. I think you've got your answer, and as it is.
That's fine. Thank you very much. I don't know how much time I have left, but I do have just one other point I'd like to, or one other issue to address, if I may. So when we were talking about FinTrack this morning, and you explored it as one option to pursue, but decided that making a change to it, the legislative amendment would take too much time. Do you recall your evidence earlier today about that?
Yes, I do.
All right. And so just so that we're all clear, because we have Canadians watching who may not understand the process, the Proceeds of Crime and Money Laundering and Terrorist Financing Act, it gives the ability to create regulations, right?
If your question is, was it possible to grant FINTRAC, to give FINTRAC these expanded powers through regulation, that is correct. And I said that this morning. We did go on to grant those powers through regulation.
And there's just a difference between how regulations are passed versus, say, example, legislation or amendments to legislation. The latter is what you have to do, the 3 readings, going to Senate. It's a much longer legislative process. That's fair?
100%.
And by comparison, passing regulations is a much shorter process.
Absolutely.
Okay, those are all my questions. Thank you very much.